General officers are privileged to carry their own coin. It's a tradition started about 15 years ago in the United States Army. And we give this to somebody who's done an outstanding job, no matter what it would be, small or large, and it's done for immediate impact, as we like to say. So I'd like to give this to Jack for his song that he just sang, because it means a heck of a lot to me. So Jack, you're quite welcome. Quite welcome. The coins contain the division symbol, the keystone, and on the back the symbol of my rank, which is a 2-star general. So again, that's something we like to do, and Jack, that song meant a lot to me. I appreciate it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 28th Infantry Division, a subject near and dear to my heart. I have spent over 35 years of my adult life serving the 28th Infantry Division, either in a part-time or now for the past 3.5 years in a full-time capacity. The division is a lot different than it was in World War II. World War II, we were organized into 3 infantry regiments of 3 battalions each. We had 4 artillery battalions. We had a tank destroyer battalion, a tank battalion, an engineer battalion. It was a very large organization, 18,000 soldiers assigned. Now we're organized into 3 maneuver brigades with only 2 battalions each. However, these battalions are larger than what you're used to and feature the M1 tank and the M2 Bradley fighting vehicle. We also have a Stryker Brigade combat team, something unknown in World War II, that basically is mounted in the Stryker vehicle that some of you have heard of, a very rapidly moving and rapidly deployable wheeled vehicle. And also we have an aviation brigade of 3 aviation battalions. So we have our own Air Force, something the 28th Division did not have. But to learn something about, really, you need to get into the people that make up the 28th Division and its history. We have been around a long time. We trace our roots back to Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin founded the Pennsylvania National Guard in 1747. Everyone knows our history. This colony was founded by Quakers. There was no compulsory militia in Pennsylvania. And that was great with the Indians. However, with the pirates that were in the Caribbean, after a while they realized there was a plum, the city of Philadelphia, they could ransack at any time. And so as they got closer and closer, Franklin finally published what is known as Plain Truth, a pamphlet, in the fall of 1747, and standing up voluntary militia associations, he called them. We called them, eventually they changed their name to Associators, and our 111th Infantry Battalion and 103rd Engineers, still in the 28th Division today, were the first 2 units he stood up. And since the government didn't really make this an official organization, Franklin had to finance this. How do you think he financed it? He used a lottery. Some things never change. So Franklin was indeed our father. And then in 1878, this is now past the American Civil War, back in those times, if you were a general officer in the National Guard, you could appoint yourself a general or talk the governor into doing that. And if you could attract several thousand soldiers, you could make yourself a division commander. So there were actually 6 divisions in the Pennsylvania Guard at that time, of different sizes, some as small as 1,000, some as large as 4,000. So the governor got fed up with this and said, I want 1 division. And in 1878, he appointed General John Hartranft, who's a Civil War Medal of Honor winner, and he put all the units in Pennsylvania under 1 division, then known as the Pennsylvania or the 7th Division, and that grew into the 28th. So we have been around as a division formation since 1878, making us the oldest continually serving division in the United States Army. Our first test was the Spanish-American War. 3 cav troops, 3 field artillery battalions, 3 infantry regiments were mobilized and all sent to Puerto Rico. This is a picture of one of our artillery batteries in Puerto Rico in action. We returned home. We were mobilized again in 1916 and spent 7 months chasing Pancho Villa around in Texas. And then in 1917, World War I came. And the division was mobilized and shipped to Camp Hancock, Georgia. Camp Hancock, Georgia, for those of you who were in the room, was probably like most of the camps and posts that you went to early in World War II. It did not exist. They had to build Camp Hancock. And then after they got it built, they shipped them out, and over to France they went in early 1918. This is a picture of the 111th Infantry Regiment en route to the front. This is a picture of the 103rd Engineers with one of the first pontoon bridges built in World War I, that over the Marne River near Chateau Thierry. We were committed in May of 1918 to stop what turned out to be the Germans' last offensive of the war. And at the end of that offensive, we stopped them right away and stopped them fast. And then demand started a counterattack within a week. That's a picture of John J. Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Force in World War I. He came out to the division after the battle, reviewed the battle summary, talked to the troops involved, and he stood there for a moment. He was a man of few words, and he kind of rubbed his chin, and he said, "Why, you are not soldiers, you are men of iron." That hence became one of our nicknames, one of our 3 nicknames, known as the Iron Division. We fought on every campaign in World War I. This is a picture of the 109th Infantry Regiment in the Meuse-Argonne. And then this is General Pershing coming and visiting us again, visiting the 2nd 112th Infantry in an inspection trip on November of 1918, right after the end of World War I. We came back to the United States in the spring of 1919, and then this is a picture of what was a tumultuous parade in the city of Philadelphia, right down Broad Street, the entire length of Broad Street, from North Broad all the way down to what is now the Navy base, or what was the Navy base, May 15th, 1919. This is right on Broad Street, very close to City Hall. The entire city, they tell me, turned out. It's a picture of General Charles Muir, our division commanding general, on horseback in front of the Union League, reviewing the troops as they marched by. I have found in one of my prized possessions is a small little pin that says, "Welcome home, Iron Division," with a keystone in the middle, with a little flag on there. I found that for sale in an Army Navy store. It was widely distributed and sold in the city of Philadelphia on May 15th, 1919, one of my most treasured possessions. Well, that was the war to end all wars, and as all you know, that didn't work. 22 years later, in February 1941, we were mobilized again for 1 year of training. Well, 1 year of training was interrupted by Pearl Harbor, and we didn't come home until December of 1945. We were mobilized, moved around the United States, we were in the Louisiana maneuvers, did a lot of different things, shipped to Wales in the fall of 1943, trained for amphibious invasion in Wales, and then were committed into combat 1 month after D-Day. Came across the shore at Omaha Beach in August of 1944, and then were very active in the hedgerow fighting, which is pictured right here. From the hedgerow, we participated in the Cobra breakout, as it was known, raced across France, and then our next stop was Gay Paris. This is the 28th Infantry Division, the 110th Infantry Regiment, as it paraded en masse through the city of Paris under the orders of General Dwight Eisenhower. He felt it was necessary to show, of course, the Parisians had taken the city from the Germans and chased them out in helping with the Free French. But they wanted to solidify the hold in the city and wanted to show a force. So 28th Division was the nearest one, came out and conducted what they called then a tactical parade through the city. And this is indeed it. One of the most famous pictures of World War II. The division marched through the city. I've been there in the Arc de Triomphe. I've seen it, seen the pictures of it, and then right into combat and continued pursuing the Germans across France until they ran to the Siegfried Line. In October 1944, found us in a place called the Hurtgen Forest. Don't know how many of you have heard about the Hurtgen Forest. Very, very difficult fighting, bitter, close-in fighting, terrible weather. It rained, it snowed, it sleeted. The enemy was heavily entrenched in ideal defensive terrain. Our objective was Schmidt, on the other side, down the Coal River Trail, across the Coal River, and back up again, and this was Schmidt after we arrived there. We unfortunately did not have enough force to hold that due to lack of close air support because the weather was so bad, and armor, and had to give the city up, and were pushed out of there after about 3 days of bitter, bitter fighting. The Hurricane Forest cost the 28th Division 6,000 battle casualties in killed, wounded, lost, and prisoner of war. 4 other divisions followed us into this meat grinder for a period of 3 months until the objectives were finally taken. The 28th Division then, realizing it was pretty well beat up, was moved to a rest area, a place called Luxembourg. I think some of you have been in Luxembourg. And in a rest area called the Ardennes, because nothing ever happened there. Do I have any Battle of the Bulge veterans here? Okay, you know that's not true. Well, nothing had happened there while they arrived. Replacements were assimilated for the first 6 weeks there. And then on December 16th, 1944, the Germans attacked. The German plan was a massive attack, 3 armies abreast, penetrating essentially 2.5 U.S. divisions, outweighing our forces on the front by about 5 or 6 to 1. The 28th Division was spread across the front, 28 miles wide. Normal frontage for a division of that type in those days was about 8 or 9 miles. So we were 3 times the width. We didn't have a chance. The Germans were determined and convinced they'd blow right through the 28th Division of the 106th and end up in Bastogne in 1 day, and then from Bastogne into Antwerp within about a week. Well, the 28th Division didn't cooperate with that plan. This is a graphic depiction of the Battle of Hosingen and Clairvaux and Wiltz and every crossroad became a fortress. We resisted fiercely till we ran out of ammunition. This unit was defended by K Company, the 109th Infantry, Bravo Company, the 103rd Engineers. There's various plaques throughout Luxembourg, and I'm sure many of you have been there, attesting to the steadfastness of the fight and the difficulty of the fight that were there. These 2 companies held off an entire German division for about 2.5 days, almost impossible to conceive of. We withdrew very slowly, as I said, and contested everything. So by the time the Germans finally got to Bastogne, 4 days later rather than 1, they found a garrison by the 101st and a combat command of the 10th Armored Division. The ensuing fight went on, and as everybody knows, 101st held on. Patton attacked from the south and finally broke the siege of the city, and they lost. War correspondent by the name of Morley Cassidy said, for 4 days from 16 to 20 December 1944, the main roads in the Ardennes were denied to the enemy. The type of resistance offered by the Keystone troops was one of the greatest feats ever performed in the history of the American arms. We also picked up another name. For those of you who can't read on the bottom, this was given to us out of fear and respect by the German army, and they called us Blutiger Elmer, or the Bloody Bucket Division. The division defended with 3 regiments abreast. The center regiment was the 110th Infantry, the one that had been pictured parading through Paris. They were really almost destroyed. So we withdrew. The 109th to the north fought along with the regiment of the 106th. The 112th to the south fought along with the regiments to the south of them. They reconstituted the division. More replacements came in. And then back by February, we were on the offensive again. This is the victory parade in Colmar, France. Colmar was the last city in France occupied by the German army, and this was the one that was assigned to the 28th Division. Expected to be a very difficult fight. We blew right through the German defense, rolled them right up in 1 day of fighting. The division then went on to ended the war in Schlieden at VE Day. August found us en route, in transit, leaving Germany in France at Le Havre, getting ready to board transport ships to come back to the United States to participate, to retrain and participate in the invasion of Japan. Of course, the atom bomb was dropped, and the division then en route was sent to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where they were demobilized in December of 1945. The colors were then returned to the Pennsylvania Army Guard, and the unit reconstituted. Had a lot of World War II vets in it, and then sons and nephews and relatives of World War II vets, and reconstituted itself and was back to full strength by the early 1950s. And then, of course, came the Korean War. September 11th, 1950, the division was mobilized, put on troop trains to be sent to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And on the way to Camp Atterbury, there was a large train wreck that killed 33 soldiers from the 109th Field Artillery Regiment, and their caskets are here in the armory that still exists in Kingston, up by Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And that was, oddly enough, an interesting date, September 11th, 1950. We trained at Camp Atterbury for a good 9 or 10 months. A picture of some of our infantry units coming out of the very muddy assault course. And they say they are smiling. One or two of the guys in the front seem to be, but I've been in an assault course. I don't usually smile when I come out. We then, rather than going to Korea, were sent to Germany once again. And so we became a part of the NATO Army for a good year and a half, almost 2 years. We then returned home and became part of the Pennsylvania Army Guard once again. And then for 43 years, 1953 to 1996, we were part of the Cold War Army, the deep reserve of the Cold War Army. Never thought we'd ever go anywhere because there was a large active component that took care of most of the problems. Well, then in 1990, then the drawdown occurred after the Gulf War. And in 1996, the U.S. intervened in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And they sent a international force in there, including a brigade from the Nordic and Polish countries put together. They had no fire support elements, so that was our first deployment. We sent a bunch of artillery officers and NCOs to work with them in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Then in 1999, our target acquisition battery was mobilized and sent to Kosovo. And then came 9/11, 2001, and everything changed. We went from the deep reserve to the front lines where we reside today. This was our first deployment after 9/11. My aide-de-camp, Captain Dan McCormick, participated in this as a soldier in the 104th Cav Squadron. We were first assigned as peacekeeping soldiers during the fall of 2002 to the spring of 2003, and did patrols like this throughout Bosnia-Herzegovina, helped that country get back on its feet again. And that was through the fall and the winter, as you see there. The division headquarters, the 104th Cav from Philadelphia, and the 109th Infantry from Scranton participated in this mobilization. At the same time, we sent 2,000 more soldiers to bases throughout Germany and Italy and Belgium to provide security, and that was called task.
Soda bus, please take line 89. Lower soda bus 89.
That's all right, no problem. They went to Europe and provided base security operations for 6 months, same time, fall of 2002 to the spring of 2003. It's a picture of their deactivation ceremony in Heidelberg, Germany, as they're getting ready to return to the United States after 6 months. While both these mobilizations were going on, the commanding general of the United States Army Forces Command, a 4-star named Larry Ellis, came to our division headquarters and said, "You soldiers are doing a great job for us. I need to call in some more of your soldiers." So they mobilized an additional 1,200 soldiers in the fall of 2003, a year later, until the spring of 2004, to go to Kosovo for a similar type mission. These were soldiers from the 111th Infantry here in Philadelphia and the 2nd 112th in Lewistown, Pennsylvania, as well as soldiers from the Division Artillery headquarters. We were so good at Kosovo and the Balkans and Bosnia-Herzegovina, they came back to us again, and in the end of 2004, I mobilized an aviation task force. There's a company of Apache helicopters, a company of Black Hawk helicopters, and a battalion headquarters, and they're working with the 40th Division as I speak to you today in Kosovo, providing airlift and aero weapons if needed. Simultaneously, we deployed over 100 soldiers to Afghanistan to train the Afghan National Army. These are deployed in small teams. You can see there's only 2 U.S. soldiers in that team of about 20 Afghanis. So they actually teach them how to be soldiers, how to use modern and work with each other as well. This is Lieutenant Colonel Scott, one of the team leaders working with the Afghan National Army as they stood up in their polling places in the fall of 2004 for that historic election, the first election I believe they ever had in the country of Afghanistan. Well, things were going on, and Iraq came up to the front burner. So Iraq was our next mission. We mobilized about 1,200 soldiers for OIF-2, which was right after the ground war. This was March of 2004 to March of 2005. All these soldiers are now home. A Company 28th Signal Battalion is pictured here. They work directly for the 1st Cavalry Division throughout in the Baghdad area. We also sent 5 artillery batteries and 2 tank companies and a HET platoon. They had a HET platoon, stands for Heavy Equipment Transporter Platoon. They moved tanks and stuff like that all over the country. The batteries and the tank companies provided information like security forces, convoy escort, detainee operations, training the Iraqi army, all kinds of things. All those soldiers came home the spring of this year, February 2005. The soldier pictured here was providing the outer cordon around Fallujah in the first fighting of Fallujah, April of 2004. This is a picture of one of Saddam's summer palaces. It has new occupants, as you can see. The boys from Tamaqua, Bravo Company, 2nd 103rd Armor. That flag you see there, they had embroidered with their name and unit and nomenclature on it, folded it up and shipped it to me. It's one of my prized possessions mounted on the wall right outside my office. You asked how the division is different. The division has a lot of helicopters and aviation assets. We also have this aerial vehicle called a Shadow Tactical Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. The Stryker Brigade combat team has 4 of these airplanes. Every brigade will have a platoon of 4. This is flown by a joystick, by could be you or me or anybody. It's very simple. I've actually flown in a simulator type thing. So it flies. It has a 12-foot wingspan, 11 feet length. It's got some really great optics on it and some tremendous recording capabilities and some immediate downlink. So as it flies over somewhere, it's transmitting the picture back to its base station. So that gives you great eyes on the battlefield. It can be aloft for about 6 hours. So that is flying, that platoon you see pictured there, deployed through Iraq in September 2004, just came home last week, working with the 101st up in the north. At the same time, while these soldiers were mobilized in the fall of 2004, we mobilized another battalion, 750 soldiers. And that's pictured here. That's known as our Task Force Dragoon. 750 soldiers operating up in the north near Tikrit. And that's one of their tanks saying hello to people in downtown Tikrit. This is Alpha Company 111th Infantry, one of the infantry companies I attached to that task force. This is the same company that I'm sure you remember lost those 6 soldiers simultaneously no more than 6 weeks ago, including some people from live right around here, because Alpha Company 111th is drawn from this area of the country. Those soldiers will come home the end of this month. They are still hurting from the loss of their fellow soldiers, but they are continue to do a remarkable job while in country. Anyway, so they came and knocked on a few doors, and this is what they found. Some locals that weren't doing some good things. Next slide. I'm asked all the time, what do my soldiers think about what's going on here? Probably the best way to describe, do they believe or feel the mission they're doing is important? The answer is yes. That's a picture of 2 of my soldiers from OIF-3 re-enlisting there on the parade grounds of Saddam's Republican Guard. Re-enlistment rates run about 60% of all deployed soldiers, which are really phenomenal. That's probably the biggest difference between this force and the force that you all were in back in World War II. There was a large draft going on, although many of you volunteered. This is an all-volunteer force. So all these people are in for once their term of service up, they're free to walk. It's not like we're in for duration. So the fact that they volunteer to stay is a testament to itself. We'll take a break now while the audio-visual is taking a break. No, I'm doing fine, thank you. It's waiting, rebooting?
We're rebooting.
Okay. No, I'm doing just fine, thank you. While we're waiting for that to reboot, is there any questions of what I've covered so far, what we're doing so far in Iraq, the 28th Division history in World War II, or prior to that? Here we go. Dan, it looks like it's turning itself back on.
Right.
General, you might tell us a little bit about the training in World War II. Anything in particular about World War II training?
World War II training, of course, went on for a long time. The division was mobilized in February of '41. They spent several months bringing the division up to strength to the size of the force they wanted it back at that point. And then it started going on large-scale maneuvers. I mentioned the Louisiana maneuvers and things like that. So they trained in the United States for all of 1942 and then went to overseas to 43, in 1943 to Wales.
No, we got it.
And there they trained again intensively for amphibious operations because the 28th Division was one of the units that was going to do the actual invasion. They didn't actually do it, but they trained extensively in using the equipment and large-scale type maneuvers. So comparing that, and then actually the training is somewhat similar to what we do now, because our soldiers are mobilized for, if you're a National Guardsman, you're going to have a year on the ground in Iraq. The Army wants you to train for 6 more months as a coherent unit, which is what our units have done prior to deployment overseas. So, next slide. We also feel that we're making an impact with the local population. I have literally scores of pictures like this, soldiers interacting, especially with the children. You talk to any of my soldiers who've been over there, they will tell you they think the children are the hope in the future for Iraq. There they haven't learned that they gotta hate Sunnis or they gotta hate Shias or they gotta hate Kurds. They're just kids and they respond to people who treat them kindly and well. And our soldiers do that. You can be proud of our soldiers, how they interact with children. This is a picture of Lieutenant Colonel Logan, my battalion commander of the force in Baji, laying out some details of a police checkpoint in that local area. Talking to Colonel Logan just 2 days ago, up in Baji when they had their first election a year ago, they had hardly any turnout. The turnout